Hey, welcome to episode 235 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Today, Ariel and I are discussing rental applications and how to spot the fraudulent ones. So, the rental market is hot.
Rental market's really hot.
The tenant pool is not. That's why I want to start this one. I had to get that off out of my mind.
It's one of my favorite topics.
It is mine too. I enjoy finding fraudulent applications, and
we actually do training sessions with our team.
I think the average person would be blown away at how common it is.
It's actually another, before we even get into it, like you think about an average landlord that might want to quote unquote save money by listing it themselves on Facebook Marketplace and, I've done it before, I've had good tenants before. You would be absolutely shocked at the number of fraudulent applications that are floating through not only the province of Ontario, but right across North America.
Yeah. I think Equifax not long ago changed the format of their reports, which was, I would say, the most commonly used report.
Equifax and TransUnion are.
TransUnion, yeah, but I find most of them are Equifax. And that report, we would find fraudulent ones all the time. Mm-hmm. I haven't come across a new one with the revised version yet, but there are other aspects to the application that can indicate a fraudulent one.
We're going to talk about all of that today.
We will. It's very important because, especially in Ontario, it's actually sad because everyone needs a house, no matter how good or bad their credit is or whatever the situation, they need somewhere to live. In Ontario, the Residential Tenancy Act makes it so that once a tenant is in, they are very hard to get out, which is like a double-edged sword. So they're doing it to protect the tenant, but because of this, landlords they will scrutinize an application. And if you are not perfect, you are going to have a very hard time finding a rental. And that's where the fraudulent rental applications come in. Tenants will go out and pay people to create fake reports that look real. So you have to know how to find this stuff.
And that's the first thing in my notes is that how important it is to know as a landlord or as a realtor how many freelance people there are right across the globe that are currently specializing in selling tenant packages. And I mean full-blown packages.
Hundreds of dollars. Like I knew of one person that paid, I think, $400 or $500.
So these people specialize in creating job letters for you. Like they will actually create on paper and even
they have people answering
by phone
phones
and email. Yes. So they'll create a job for you, create a job letter and pay stubs. They'll have people that are answering the phones or responding to emails.
They create websites.
Yes.
Fake company websites.
Fake company websites, fake LinkedIn profiles. They'll use addresses where there's a suite number. So even if you Google map it, Street View map it, you won't be able to 100% identify it. So there are specialists that are doing this for tenants for their application process.
Right.
So it's important to know that those are currently very prominent in the marketplace. So as a landlord, we've talked about this in the past, it's important to get credit reports for anybody that's applying for the property. You want to have a rental application completely filled out with all of the pertinent information about the potential tenants. The most recent pay stubs.
Concurrent.
An employment letter.
That can be hard to get, but depending on the company. So tenants listening or watching, make sure you get that in advance. So if you know, I'm going to have to find a new rental soon, speak to HR or whomever, your manager, depending on the process, and get it requested early.
So where have we, well, first of all, all of those documents need to be scrutinized and cross-referenced.
And ID. I don't know if you said ID, but ID is a good one for cross-referencing.
Sure. Now, we have noticed that with some of these fraudulent applications, that as soon as you start cross-referencing them, because there are better fraud packages out there than others.
Depends on if they got the silver or the gold or the platinum.
Yeah. What level of Fiverr person did you hire? Sometimes when you're doing the cross-referencing, it becomes immediately apparent that something is off. So, give you an example. The job letter says this person makes $100,000 a year working for XYZ company, and the pay stub says XYZA company, and it's $150,000 year-to-date income, and it's October. So you start seeing things that might not line up, might not match up. But where have we caught the most amount of fraudulent documents? For me, inconsistencies in fonts and alignment of the document itself, or the words.
Formatting.
Formatting.
Yes.
Formatting. So you'll see sometimes
like any standardized document. So if it's a pay stub or if it's a credit report, again, I haven't seen it with the new ones, but with the old credit reports, it was very common. You would see formatting issues. If things are not consistent from one to the next, the alignment of numbers, it should always be the exact same. They're not printing this out on, those old
dot matrix
where it would do like whatever, and if the paper was aligned slightly different, it would be understandable. These are pre-formatted PDFs being printed or just saved and sent to you. They need to be consistent.
One of the first things I do is I take a sheet of paper and I line it up to the top of the document from the first letter, and then see how the other lines start. And sometimes you'll see a word, 3-4 sentences down that is just in by like 1/8 of an inch or something.
Yeah.
And that doesn't actually exist in a true document.
Another thing that you've caught that I thought was really interesting is I think it was credit reports. I can't remember. It must have been credit reports. They were printed documents off the web. So they had the header and footer with the URL in the footer,
right,
and two different people submitting credit reports. So like husband and wife or whatever the scenario, two tenants for one property had different reports, but this exact same URL.
Right.
So they changed all the content, but they missed that.
Yes. And that would be different if it was a true different report.
Yes. And it's not to say these people are necessarily not good people either. Like they may be having trouble getting it because they have gone through a divorce and there's credit issues, and they may be
job instability.
It can be very challenging.
New immigrant.
Yeah. Like I'm always very open to every scenario.
Of course.
But the moment I find somebody lying, they're done.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. Steve Chiquetto on our team had one recently.
Okay, I'm not aware.
Where he had a job letter and there were spelling errors in the job letter. The phone number for the business was not an operating number, but there was a number for the person that signed off on this job letter. And it was just some random cell phone number, with no other kind of contact information or whatever. So it was,
He called it?
Yeah.
And do you know how the conversation went? Because I find that's always interesting.
Yeah, I don't know specifically, but Steve said within moments of having that discussion that he realized, this is just some random dude that I'm talking to.
Well, and the scary thing is that most of these people are represented by a real estate agent. And there's usually one of two things happening. Either the real estate agent is in on it, which I have come across, or they are just oblivious and have no idea.
You led right into my note about tips. As a realtor representing a tenant, representing a landlord, or as a landlord yourself, first thing you should do is get a background story on the relationship that exists between the realtor and the prospective tenant.
Yes, that is profoundly valuable.
How do they know these people? Was it just a random lead that came through your email or from realtor.ca or from your website or whatever, and you just had them email you all the documents, you showed them a couple places, and voila, here we go? Or is it a former colleague of mine that I've known for years,
or a client's son or whatever,
or a past client, or just get the story.
Yeah, and and be able to substantiate and kind of corroborate your story, right? Like if you say you've known them for 10 years, I'll always go to their Facebook page and see if they're friends with each other, that sort of stuff.
Hey, we've talked about that a lot, is doing the creep side of tenant applications.
Yes.
So find out, are they on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. See where you can find them. Google their names. We had an applicant that was convicted.
You had that one coming across your
felon.
Desk.
Yeah. Google their email addresses. Google their current and previous places of residences.
The most recent one I had, I was able to corroborate the guy's story because the agent.
You're liking that word today.
I am. Well, it's appropriate for this
corroborate
particular situation. So this agent had known the tenant for upwards of a decade, and I knew a few of I think there's 2 or 3 previous addresses that I had knowledge of, and I pulled the old listings for each of them, and sure enough, this agent was the agent representing the buyer or tenant in this scenario, I guess, in each of those transactions. So that gave me peace of mind. It's like, okay, well, he knows them personally. He's helped him on 3 other properties. You would assume that an agent would not represent a problematic tenant, certainly not 3 times.
Although don't make that assumption too easily, because the realtor is off the hook anyway if there's any issues.
Sure, and maybe he's paying him to help him, right? You never know. But and on that note, I would say any one thing in a transaction should not be a deal breaker, but should also be scrutinized a little bit. Like if someone has bad credit because of one thing, I won't just say, okay, well, I'm not considering it. I'll say, well, what happened and why did it happen and what have they done to change it?
Yeah. Lots of fraud going out there. You got to be careful. Do your due diligence, cross-reference everything. It is noticeable when documents are fraudulent. Dates on pay stubs where it just doesn't make sense.
Calculations.
That is the biggest error we find on pay stubs.
Yeah.
Is something does not add up. So, and that's why I like to have even more than 2 pay stubs that are concurrent.
Yeah.
So you get the last 6 weeks of their pay.
So you can
the last
corroborate
3,
their story.
You can corroborate their story. The last 3 pay stubs even, and do the math. So how much did they get paid in this pay? And what is their year to date? And then add it up again on the next stub and see if
all their EI contributions, CPP, all that stuff. Make sure it's all changing with each paycheck.
Changing in relative fashion to what it should be changing to.
Right.
Because oftentimes these fraudulent documents are from countries overseas.
Yeah.
They're a lot of the poorer countries that are offering these services on a lot of freelance sites or whatever, the dark web. And all of a sudden, maybe they're
What
mad.
is the dark web? I never understood.
Stay tuned
I
for
feel
the
like
next
that's
episode.
something Ian would know about.
Don't Google it. Don't Google it.
Yeah. You'll be on a watch list.
Yeah. So lots of fraud out there. Be careful. And to your point, Adrian, once the tenant has taken possession, it's too late.
It's funny because, realistically, if you have a tenant who is in need of an eviction, whether it's due to no payment or damaging the property, whatever the reason is, the process could take you a year, realistically.
For sure,
take you about
now.
6 months just to set a date.
And it'll cost you time and money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over and above what you're losing from.
Yeah. It was funny on April 1st this year, for April Fools, somebody on a local real estate Facebook page posted something saying, the landlord and tenant board finally got the backlog of applications out of the way, and now there's just a 2-week wait. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, because going through COVID when everything was kind of shut down and
they froze evictions, they froze rent increases. There was professional renters just living rent free while privately
people that
owned
couldn't afford because they were working.
That too, but a lot of people were taking advantage of the system, and landlords were out. In many cases, this is their livelihood or their retirement fund, and they couldn't make payments.
So anyway, that's it. Be careful.
Do your due diligence. Scrutinize the paperwork, and hire a good real estate agent.
Meet the people before you.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. That's important.
Yeah.
There's 2 steps in the process. One is verifying the documents and saying, okay, is this person worthy of getting to phase 2 of the plan? So phase 1 is qualifying them on paper. Stage 2 is corroborating their story in person. It's easy to lie on paper. It's not easy to lie in person.
Or virtually.
Well, virtually, just to see them face to face, yes.
Yeah, a face to face.
It's not always
meeting.
feasible. I had a guy in Toronto that applied for a place in Milton, and I didn't want to drag him all the way to here, and I sure wasn't going to Toronto. So we had a virtual call, and I met him and his fiance, and they were very nice people. And
right. If you get a bad gut feeling,
follow it.
Follow your gut, and test these people when you meet them face to face. Ask them to explain some of those documents. Oh, I see you work for XYZ company. How long have you been there for?
Or don't even say XYZ company. Say, who do you work for again?
Right. Play stupid.
Yeah. I do the same with references.
For sure.
Right. If it's an existing landlord, which may be a fake person, you say, I have a client or tenant applying for a property to rent. Their name is whatever. They're at your property on, I think, Anywhere Street in Milton. What's the house number? Oh, okay. How many units is that? Or how many bedrooms is that condo?
Just ask questions.
Just ask questions to see if they know what they're talking about.
The story has to line up.
Yeah.
Because somebody that's telling the truth, the story will remain consistent.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of like you're putting them on the, taking them to court.
Yes.
You're grilling them. So
it's necessary. And a lot of tenants out there complain about this, but in Ontario specifically, it is absolutely necessary. So if you're not willing to go through the motions of providing all your personal information, you're just quite simply you're not going to find a place to rent. And if you do, I guarantee you it's a landlord that you do not want to have as a landlord. Because
you mean a tenant?
No, the tenant finds a landlord who doesn't care who's there.
Sorry.
It's probably a mold-infested place with problems that are never going to be taken care of. And it's important for the tenant as well to have a good landlord as it is a landlord to have a good tenant.
Well said.
Goodbye. There you have it. Thanks for watching episode 235. If you enjoyed the podcast, show us some love and hit the subscribe button. Hopefully today's content helps you as a landlord to find the right tenant.